The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. In the world of experimental music, outcomes and accolades for creators can be uncertain and at times seem far and few between. Therefore, creators and practitioners of experimental music must embrace the one thing they will always have complete control over: the process. This podcast aims to understand this creative process by listening to new works and discussing them with their creators. Each episode focuses on one creator and their music. Understanding how and why they create can inform aspiring creatives and help audiences better understand and navigate experimental music. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and I'll be your host as we explore the world of experimental music, creativity, and the human need to find purpose in their world and lives. This is The Process.
Hesperia is a Greek meaning of evening star. And I think I first heard about this probably through an astrology podcast, and just really loved the meaning. And that's where the title came from. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you've, at this point, Violet Knox as an entity has done many albums. So what was the inspiration to do another one? Was there something different that you thought you'd try this time? Was it literally like, we've got more music and we've got to do something with it? Andrew, what do you think? What was the deep, life meaningful reason for creating this album?
Well, I think we were sort of on board to do another album after the last one. That was always the intention. It was just that I think the approach was a little different for this one.
Sure.
And I mean, Des and Noel can talk to what they were thinking about. For me, the last record, which came out of the longer Museum of Science performance, my personal feeling was that it ended up getting pruned down, the music, a little more than I wanted to, and things were succinct, but maybe a little bit terse. And so my own motivation was to open things up a little bit more and have some kind of longer, less, still structured, but not as specifically or overtly structured. And so that's kind of where Hesperia's original composition came from. Also, the early versions of Stranger. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm sure that Noel and Des have their own perspectives.
Yeah, I think the intention was not to have it traditional as the last album, and have the formats be very different.
I see.
And we really wanted a more experimental, dark vibe to it.
Yeah, pretty much as soon as the last record came out, there were already plans to create another record. Sure. I mean, Andrew and Des are pretty prolific, and they are the main, they collaborate. They practice almost every day, which blows my mind. So they're just an incredible duo. And they had already had new music already in the queue. And we had also been talking about doing another dance collaboration with one of our friends, Wisty. And it's interesting because the former record, our last record, came out of that dance collaboration at the Museum of Science.
That's right.
With Callie Chapman. This one was we were simultaneously writing for an album, but also writing for a dance performance, but intentionally making it more expansive. And like an hour. We were doing like 57 minutes was our time. So it was sort of like the opposite effect. And it's interesting that it was both related to dance.
Yeah. So was it less about just, the previous album, they were maybe 3 to 4 minute tracks. They kind of felt, a little bit more sort of straightforward, or maybe, like you said, Andrew, pared down, but maybe, sort of condensed. So for you, Andrew, was it really just about like having some space to experiment a little bit more? Or was it just, was it once again about, hey, we have to do X amount of time? Because I remember with Arrow of Time, there was a little bit about like filling the actual time, and then being, sort of paring it down for the album. So was this different? Was it just like make it long and keep it long, or?
It was different because not that it was more experimentation, but that it didn't get cropped down as much. And I think that when we came up against recording the last album, we had these incredibly long tracks. And sometimes when you get on a sort of trajectory, which is, we have a 20-minute track, it can't be 20 minutes. Right. You're going in that direction and you just keep going. And so that gets the 20 minutes down to 3 minutes. And so I was trying to hit a middle ground there where there was a little more room to breathe in the tracks from where the genesis of it came.
Yeah.
And so that, Hesperia ended up actually getting just longer and longer as we recorded it, which, I was perfectly happy with.
Mm. It ended up being longer for the performance, but
even longer then, right?
Yeah, correct.
Right.
Yeah, and we actually had to create a lot of additional parts for the recent Aero Arts performance. Mm. So I personally like the songs even more.
Yeah.
But they're not recorded yet. So.
The next record is a 4-album set that is just Hesperia.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, that sounds pretty prolific.
Hesperia 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3.
Right.
Yeah. So there'll be no information on just Roman numerals on the albums, right?
Yes.
Like a Led Zeppelin type thing. So you're creating it. That's really interesting, because Noel kind of mentioned too, it's like you're creating this yet again for another sort of event, for a dance, for something else that's happening. So was the rehearsal for that performance actually rehearsing for the recording? Was it kind of the same, or was the recording and the rehearsal for that a separate process?
It was really different this round because the album recording was already in the bag and delivered by the time we started rehearsing for the Aero Arts. And so it was really sort of expanding those into the structure, even though we had been thinking about it in terms of the performance. We had been performing for the record, and so then kind of had to reverse gears.
And I know in the past, at least my assumption was that, Andrew and Des, you both sort of kind of created some, foundational type stuff. And then at some point, Noel came in, writing lyrics, doing other things. Was that the process this time, or was it sort of a make something, hand it off, or was it more sort of a kind of back and forth process?
I think one unique thing about this before we got into recording is some of these songs were somewhat developed, and we had an opportunity to actually perform them out. Yeah. So by the time that we got to recording, which Noel already had vocals for, I think most of them, or they were kind of still developing, it's still very new. It made the process, I think, for the actual recording and this recent performance easier, because we were more familiar with the songs, as opposed to just recording them, then throwing them into the show. Right. And not having them totally together, which was the case of Arrow of Time. Yeah. I remember specific songs that we were just kind of winging it. I mean, there was a lot of improvisation. They were structures, but they were super. Yeah. This show was very tight and very well rehearsed. Yeah, because we knew the material well. And it was, and a couple of the songs like 160 is brand new. We had never performed that out. So September 12th was the first time that an audience got to actually hear it. With Andrew and I writing these songs, always thinking of Noel, we put it together, write it to the best of our ability. But when Noel comes in, sometimes we may have to adjust it. But often it seems to flow well. And we just continue to tighten it up. Yeah. I was
going to ask that, like, Noel, is there ever a point when you got, some part of a song and we're just like, hey, there's like no room to breathe in here. Like, I need a little bit more space here. Was that ever, on a particular track?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very, very organic when we get together and practice, and we do have a hard amount of practice too. So a big part, sometimes I'll hear the song before I come to rehearsal, and sometimes I'll just hear it cold. Mm-hmm. And so I think at least the first couple times we play it together, the first couple of rehearsals, we're really just sort of playing around with it and recording what I do. And from there, I can like write and build off of that on top. But no, I have with other musical projects.
Sure.
And I think at the last Arrow of Time, there were moments, especially when mixing, when it was like, oh yeah, this is actually like, this is a little too busy here. Mm-hmm. We might have to pull something back, etc. But no, not this round. Yeah. I didn't feel that way at all.
And I remember when we presented Aruna to Noel, you nailed it. It was so good, your vocals. Mm-hmm. Do you remember?
Kind of. I don't know. I think I don't know. It is very easy to make music with the two of you, so I don't know why or what's so different about it, but it just feels very natural.
I mean, I remember Aruna specifically too when you came in, Noel, and it was literally the first time we played it, and what you sang sounded done. It was unbelievable.
Yes, it was.
So one of the things I noticed too, Des, specifically talking about sort of, your role on this project and other ones. I know you come from a background of playing guitar and, playing with that. I've noticed even just at, recent shows and stuff, the guitars aren't there. It's more of a synth setup, kind of a more, no, I won't say stripped down because there's a lot of equipment on stage, but a less sort of, guitar focus. And is that something, and that's something I noticed in this album. I didn't really hear what I perceived to be, any sort of guitar tones. Is that something as a group you've sort of said like, hey, we're not going to have guitar, or is it just something that you think maybe has happened organically?
First of all, I love guitar. I played guitar for many years.
Yep.
Guitar will come back. I have specific pedals waiting in my case that I can't play with my synth. But I think it was a decision as we were paring down. I used to bring my Fender tube amp, guitar, was a lot of gear, and I did have a smaller synth that I was starting to learn a few years ago. And I went one day and checked out the Korg XD and absolutely fell in love with it, brought it to rehearsal, and Andrew and I immediately wrote Spaceport 5. I just put my hand on that thing and it was So now I play with like 4 or 5 pedals through the synthesizer. And a friend of ours that actually just attended the Aero Arts Festival had said, like, Des, you play the synthesizer like you play guitar. So I still see it as like my another extension of my guitar with all my effects. And right now we have so much gear to attend, is particularly with like Noelle coming in with her beautiful vocals. I feel like a great responsibility to carry the melody and whatever I'm doing for her and for the group. And Andrew and I really have to hold a lot of ground. So it would be difficult for me to bring guitar back at this second. But at some point, yes, it will definitely return, at least for like a couple songs. So
I miss the guitar. I mean, everything you're doing is so beautiful, but I loved it. The guitar came out. My cat is photobombing.
The cat loves guitar as well.
It's not gone forever. I mean, I'm still thinking about it, but it will return. Yeah,
and I think it does become a practicality thing. It's like, I could bring everything in the kitchen sink to a show, but then I've got to transport that. I've got to, carry that, and then have it all work and test it and tune it and all that. And I, even in my own setup, just paring it down, like what's the least I can bring, which always ends up being way more than I should have, right? But that's really interesting. I love this idea too, that even if it's not the guitar, you'll be using a different instrument in a very, similar way, or, a similar approach, even if it's different. Speaking of the production on the album, there was a lot of really cool stuff on this album, Andrew, as far as, just some of the drum machines and the synths and sort of the textures I was hearing. There's a really wonderful moment on the title track where I think it's about halfway through the song, we hear some wonderful vocals from Noelle, throughout the first part of the song. And then there's this really cool sort of at like 4 minutes where the vocals seem to just kind of dissipate into this like wonderful reverb cloud. And I wondered about that. And maybe this is like an Andrew and a Noelle question, but was that all like studio magic after the fact, or was that something as you're sort of workshopping and practicing, like Noelle mentioned, that's something that kind of came organically?
What song was this?
This
Hesperia.
was on Hesperia.
I feel like it's kind of a combination of both. Because we were workshopping it, but when we were recording, I had a couple of different versions. I have 2 specific versions that I wanted to try out. Because the song is the longest song on the record, essentially. I wanted to make sure that there was enough expansion between it. And it took us a second. It took us a few tries, but we were able to like finally get it. I think it just also mix it. We were able to like mix it the way we wanted. So workshop and is both.
Yeah. And so that was one of the tracks that had a number of vocal takes that we were sort of comping together. Yeah. And most of the vocal effects are things that we'll record live, and they'll be sort of reactive to Noel's singing. Mm-hmm. That particular hangover that you're talking about, is that you're talking about that sort of extended feedback delay?
Yeah. Very cool effect.
It was... that transition to the song, there just needed to be something that was carrying it over into the next phrase.
Yeah, like a dovetail.
And because of the way the whole record was recorded, typically live, I have all these different effect sends that I use through this particular board, and we couldn't record that way. So I was doing it. One night I was going back and redoing all my effect sends through the board so I could do them live. And then I was working on Hesperia, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I can get a delay on the vocal to hang over that part. And so that was just sort of at the end of a session where I was replacing my own delay stuff with the performance version of it, and then threw that on the vocals, see if it worked, and it seemed to like pull those two parts together. So
that's interesting, and that's like definitely a technique live to kind of like use a little delay to sort of transition from one set or one frame to another. And it's interesting though that then that kind of informs sort of the production after the fact. Even though it's kind of a live way to add some glue. But yeah, speaking of layering vocals and having comping takes like you mentioned, but also just the layers of vocals that I heard throughout the album. It's not something that was as common. Maybe on like Chaos on the last album, there was like a little bit of layering. But Noel, on this album, there was a lot of, like you just kind of mentioned, there was a lot of sort of different extended vocal techniques and things where you were kind of exploring, kind of expanding on sort of the original ideas. Like especially in Hesperia, there's like the shush, the shushing thing that happens. There's like a warbling. It's not warbling. I know it's a vocal. It's like a vocal technique.
No,
I don't know the name.
Call it a warble. You can call it a warble.
Yeah.
Right.
So there was all that stuff going on. What is that? Just like you were saying, you wanted to kind of experiment more or expand the ideas because some of the tracks were so long?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was part of it. I think I just wanted to put in some texture and some sound that wasn't like a words that would sort of fit neatly into it, but also just kind of add an element, that still sounded like the voice.
Right.
In Xena, or I guess we call, not Xena. What do we call it now? Strange. Sorry, there's
Stranger.
title.
Yeah.
Stranger. I think it's Xena in my notes, but yeah.
So hard. So we've had all these working titles that comes up with often. With Xena, that was a recording project that we had started off with. I think last year we had recorded it just off the cuff. It started off that way anyway. So I had all of these vocals that then Andrew basically mixed and fit into the song. There are some shows I can't play live. And so they had made it so that I would still be part of the performance.
I see.
And then we started to decide that we were going to put it on the record. We were going to perform these songs live, which is interesting. Performing with myself live, like with the recording.
Right. Yeah.
Because then I'm
like
going
a backing
to
track.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. Yeah. And I guess at some point I could probably just sing. If I'm not, I could just do it myself, I guess. Right. But it sounds really, really cool. And so from that, we just basically took these raw vocal tracks that we had done about a year ago, and then I sang over them. And then we kind of fit into that because it's like more upbeat. There's a lot going on in that song.
So since I booked the shows, or I could mention, so October 12th, Arlington Street Church in Boston. They have a beautiful chapel called Honeywell Chapel. And Daedalus, a performer from Providence, will be there. He's very well known. Violet Knox and Noel Dorsey. Doug Bielmeyer.
Heard of him.
Met him before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it Leftetron? I think his name. It's Ian Conley that will be opening.
Great.
And Jay Bagast will be playing DJ sets before, after, and between bands. And we have visual artist by the name of Zombie and his partner that will be doing very interesting visuals. Do you want to comment on the visuals or describe them, Andrew, since you know Zombie and you work with him a little bit?
Yeah, Zombie and Emma. Zombie does. And his last name is Zombie, which is why he goes by Zombie. People ask that a lot. But he does lots of mapping, and frequently he'll do it in ways where there's not a defined edge to the projections, which I find really interesting. So we did a show down at Myrtle in Providence, and a lot of the projections were just these streaks of light over the stage, and it's sort of in the space somewhere between like a light show and a projection. It's all coming from mapped projection, but it looks a little different than your 16 by 9, rectangle on a screen.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
it'll be quite spectacular in that chapel, for sure.
Fantastic. So with that great show coming up, there's many more events that are coming up. But the biggest news is Hesperia, which is, tell us, first of all, the release date, where we can go to get it, buy it, listen to it, and all the other great things about the album.
Yeah, so it releases on Somewhere Cold Records, which is a USA label. He's based right now in Kentucky. If anybody's unfamiliar with his label, please check him out. So we're psyched to have a second album releasing, and right now you can purchase that album on his Bandcamp website. As of October 7th, it will be on the Violet Knox Bandcamp page, so either one. Also, we got news today, or confirmation, that Amiga Project in Germany will release our album as well on October 14th.
Thanks to Des, Andrew, and Noel of Violet Knox for sharing their time and music with me. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out other episodes in the series, and as always, like, subscribe, or leave a comment on your preferred podcasting app. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and this has been The Process.